Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another standard podcast of Earth and Body Ecosystems.
Join us as we bridge the gap between our bodies and the world that surrounds us.
And I have one of my mentors here today, and her presently running Blazing Star since 2000 is Tanya Limas. She studied natural therapy at Walworth College of Natural Therapies in England. In the early 1990s, she apprenticed in the wise woman tradition of healing with Susan Weed, as well as teaching at Blazing Star Herbal School and beyond. She maintains a clinical herbal practice in Western Mass, specializing in pediatric herbalism and self-care. Tanya has served as vice president of the Northeast Herbal Association, as well as a professional member of the National Association of Holistic Aromatherapy. I'm a member of Mass NOFA and UPS. A lover of real food, she organized the first local chapter of Weston A. Price, organized in Western Mass, bringing community together through local food activism. She has taught at the Northeast Women's Herbal Conference, the Green Nations Gathering, the Flower Essence Conference, the Northeastern Aromatherapy Conference, NOFA, UPS, and several other conferences. When she is not teaching apprentices or participating in herbal events, you may find her frequently in local coffee houses with friends, new and old, discussing dreaming ideas, feminist causes, or simply wandering in the woods looking for wild mushrooms to cook up for dinner for whoever dare show up. Also, Blazing Star Herbal School is dedicated to teaching traditional herbal medicine in a way that supports a more sustainable future for all members of the green world and shows respect for the integrity of nature. We offer a unique perspective on herbalism, weaving social and political aspects of health, healing through the study of medical herbs and food practices. We inspire students to find their own healing path by creating a personal relationship with the plant world. The school also serves as a local and national resource for education and networking. Welcome, Tanya. And so I'm just going to say a little bit, and then I'm going to ask Tanya to catch up with us. So I think probably one of her first classes, I took therapeutic herbalism with Tanya in 2001, I believe I started and finished in 2002. So since that time, what's been up to, what's grown, and what's going on in the herbal world for you?
Wow, that has been a while.
But I know.
Well, I guess the first thing that comes to mind when you say what's happened since 2002 is that Blazing Star Herbal School has moved 3 times, all within a couple of miles, and we're really back very close to where we began, the Ashfield-Conway line. So, when you put it like that intro, I'm like, that's the first thing that comes to mind, like moving gardens, starting gardens, and growing. And I think with all the moves, because you took the apprenticeship when I first took over from Gail Aurich, who founded Blazing Star Herbal School back in 1984. As most people know, she passed away in 2000, which is when I took over the school. So you began right at the beginning.
Yeah.
So I think with every move, what's really changed with the school is that it's become more and more my vision and more my own. Like when in 2001, the gardens that we were working with, the plants that we were working with had been planted by Gail. Her vision was very much Gail's. I mean, it was a beautiful vision and we loved it. But over the years, I feel like the school's taken its slightly different form, which has transitioned from her vision to my vision, while at the same time really maintaining the same focus on grassroots herbalism, do-it-yourself herbalism, and traditional healing. So I think the foundation is very much the same, but the flavor, perhaps, the toppings are a little different over the years. The herbs we use are probably a little different now than they were then. I've probably forgotten half of what I knew back in 2001 and have learned a whole different new set of skills related to herbalism, and practicing that, because as with health, herbalism is evolving and changing, and the herbs that are presenting to us now are very different than the herbs that were offering themselves back then.
The one I can think of is Tulsi. I don't remember that being in the forefront like it is now.
Mm-hmm.
That's one
I don't think I was growing spilanthes back then either.
Yeah.
I don't think I was growing Chinese skullcap either.
Right.
I think the herbs change over time, but I think you're right. Like Tulsi is such a foundation these days in herbalist gardens, whereas back then I don't think it was even in the curriculum.
No, I don't recall that either. And then Japanese knotweed, which is a tremendous, wonderful herb. That wasn't in the curriculum, and now it's it's invasive, and
Andrographis. I don't think we were talking about Andrographis back then. Of course, a lot of this is like related to what people are going through.
Yep.
And Lyme being such an epidemic, we have a whole set of therapeutics around Lyme that we weren't using back then. Of course, what's going to come out of this COVID, we're going to have a whole new set of therapeutics that we weren't using the same way 20 years ago.
Right.
And what we were focusing on back then might not be in the forefront, because we really respond to people's needs and community needs. And
this is really interesting. Something that just came to my mind is, do you think, and I think I know what you will say, is as we change, the herbs change with us, and more like the Japanese knotweed presents itself in areas where Lyme is most prevalent. So if you have Japanese knotweed growing in your area, most likely, so have you noticed that with the change? Like, I could find St. John's wort all over the place. Now it's not as prevalent, it's kind of stepped back a little bit, even though I think it's still a really important herb.
I think the herbs we need will present themselves around us for sure.
Yeah.
I think, it's a little more complex than that, because we're in a complicated relationship with plants. And it's not as simple as like every plant. I mean, it is as simple, and it's a little more than that. One of the issues that I'm thinking a lot about this year around my neighborhood is we have 10 times more poison ivy than we have. I mean, it's a bumper year for poison ivy and Indian pipe. Both those plants, I have never seen as much of them ever. And the poison ivy, I think, very much relates to the kind of people being home more, not being out and about, the regeneration, like the stay away, the regeneration of the land as people are less active in the world. One of the, like, I feel like everything I say can be interpreted in many ways, and so it should be. And,
Right.
you know, a lot of it is philosophy and ideas that grow as you talk about them and share them. So I'm definitely not at all ever suggesting that what I say is the absolute truth. It's my truth or my observation.
Exactly. And I agree. Since I'm not that far as a crow flies from you, that I agree. The poison ivy is like having a field day, so to speak, and it's, you know, it's growing out onto the edge of the roadways in where I live. You know, it's like, what?
Yeah.
Make sure me and the
And what
dog.
is poison ivy's message? Generally is stay out,
Yeah.
stay away, let me heal, let me regenerate.
Yes.
So, you
Yes.
know, it's interesting that poison ivy has been like my wow this year. I mean, I have been coveted it from top to bottom, I think, since April, you know, because it touches everything of my cats. But I think there's a message, you know, it's, you know, we need to slow down and listen.
Right. And that's what I want to I think we're probably talking above people a lot because we're, you know, we're herbalists. So, but basically we're all connected. The natural world is not separate from us, and it responds to
Absolutely.
us more than people realize.
Yeah, we're in a reciprocal relationship.
Yeah.
We're in a symbiotic relationship.
There's no mistake that the poison ivy is growing like crazy. And I would think of it, it's like, I remember the story that poison to the Native Americans, it wasn't as toxic to them as it is to the settlers, let's say, okay? And so it wasn't really, but it became more toxic because of the practices of the settlers of chop everything down, come in, take everything we need, and not being respectful of that relationship between the natural world and us. And that's what what part of this podcast is about. Our whole theory is bridging that connection of that we
And I have a story for you. I have a story for you
Oh,
right
wonderful.
along these same lines. And this story, you know, is a little out there, you know, it kind of, you know, might put me in the little out there category.
That's fine.
But
We love out there.
Yep.
that's great. As I've grown older, I've grown more allergic to poison ivy. You know, I grew up in the UK. We don't have poison ivy there. So probably for the past, you know, for the first 15 years of being in the US, I was the person that could walk through the poison ivy and collect the herbs and have no reaction.
Mm-hmm.
But you build up, you know, and, you know, I began with 1 or 2 bites, you know, many years ago. And now it's like, I feel like I look at it and I break out. And I'm cautious. I know it. I'm aware. But part of the job of Wildcraft, it means that you're wandering through surfaces and touching plants that might have touched the poison ivy. And then they're the pets that, you know, might roll in it and then come in and hug us and leave, you know, the oil all over. But about 3 years ago, at the beginning of the season, I went, you know, into an area where I harvest. It was an elder grove, actually, where I know there's a lot of poison ivy. And I decided to sit with a poison ivy and try to come into understanding with the poison ivy. And at the end of that kind of communication session, I feel like I made a deal with the poison ivy that year that I would harvest with good intention of healing others. I would harvest responsibly, thoughtfully, you know, not strip the land, and listen as I harvested. And if I were to do that with good intention, the poison ivy would leave me alone. Like, that was the deal I made. And for that whole season, I did not get any poison ivy. There were times I looked down and it's like, uh-oh, I'm standing in poison. There's a little bit of poison ivy up on my ankle, you know, but I did not get one poison ivy blister that whole season. Then last year the pandemic hit, and I had like other things on my mind, and forgot about reconnecting with poison ivy to reset up a deal, for lack of a better like word, communication. And so, I got some poison ivy last year. And then this year, at the beginning of the season, I went out to try and repeat that kind of communication. And poison ivy was very clear: no deals this year. I'm giving no passes. And, I don't know if that was me personally. I mean, did I, was I inconsistent? Was it a personal message or more of a global message? Like, there are no deals this year. I'm here for a reason. I'm strong for a reason. And I need everyone to respect that. So I found that interesting, like I haven't fully processed it, the meaning to its full extent. Right. I obviously have ideas about what's going on and what it could mean, but I think it's an interesting, story, an interesting learning.
It is. It is. Now, I had read someplace that when you have a plant such as poison ivy, that the cure is real close by. And I heard that there was a plant, and I can't remember what it was. Do you know what plant that is?
Is it
jewelweed?
Jewelweed. That's also interesting in that in my area, there's a lot of jewelweed in general. This year, there's a lot, but not the same amount of growth in the jewelweed as there has been in the poison ivy. Does that make sense? Like, we have jewelweed, but it's not a bumper year for the jewelweed. Like it is poison ivy.
And you would think it would be, because we've certainly got copious amounts of rain. So, and it would seem to me that water. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Also, Pam Montgomery has a great story. And I'm assuming you know Pam Montgomery up in Vermont. She's an herbalist and an author. She does a lot of plant spirit medicine. She's an herbal elder, one of my teachers from many years ago. She has an experience, and this is probably not the complete experience. I don't remember all the details, but she was having issues with poison ivy as well. And poison ivy, and this is back when she lived in the Hudson Valley area, poison ivy instructed her at the beginning of the spring to take a tiny bite of poison ivy, kind of like a homeopathic, and that would like help her not be allergic anymore. And I think it was like one bite at the beginning of every season. And she did that and had been doing it for a while, and it was really effective. Of course, I am not suggesting to anyone that they should go eat poison ivy. Like, this was a very personal experience of an experienced herbalist healer following kind of plant instruction. But that worked for her. And, of course, it's a homeopathic, same cure, same. But, I haven't had that personal experience.
Right.
I think it's interesting.
That is interesting. And that goes into, there's a basic principle, one of the basic principles in herbalism and other homeopathy also is like cures like. So something that's very similar will cure something very, so one of the things is, well, I'm going to use myself, for example. I went on a keto diet and it's helped me tremendously. So keto is high fat, moderate protein, lots of vegetables, right? So, and that made sense. Something clicked in me because of the doctrine of signatures that like cures like. So eating fat can, for some people, I'm not advocating for everybody, right? We're all different, right? Yeah, and I think it also depends on your ancestry. But that's been like my cure, the fat heals.
That's,
The fat
and I
cures the
must
fat.
say, you look great. I was noticing how good you're looking.
Thank
Vibrant,
you.
and your skin looks great as well.
Yeah. I went back to eating meat a little bit, and don't consume a lot of it, but I do eat meat. And I know you were an advocate of that and maybe we could segue into Weston Price Foundation that you started, because that has it's about nutrition, right? So
And I must add here that while I was a proponent of and am believe in the early work of the Weston Price Association and Sally Fallon, I am no longer following them closely and no longer fully support their more recent work. So yes, their nourishing traditions, the meat, the full fat diet, and real food, 100%. But I kind of no longer support the direction they've taken. So I just have to be clear about that.
That's fine. I'm familiar with the Nourishing Traditions, that book. So that's what I haven't followed, current work either. So I have no idea which direction they've gone to. But that happens, right? I mean, people change and they change their perspective. That can be shocking to some of us. And
well, flow is important. Health isn't static. We all grow.
Exactly.
And, sometimes we have to cut off relations because it doesn't resonate, but it's not for us, but the early work of Sally Fallon was very important in my growth and my learning.
Right. And I can see where it's probably it follows the paleo and keto which are very similar. And I kind of wish I had paid more attention back then, because I was like, I'm going to be a vegetarian, I'm not going to eat meat. And it really never worked for me. I never really had that feeling of, and then I looked through my ancestry, and like my ancestors would have been eating meat. They would have been eating raw dairy. This is what they would have been eating. And most of my ancestors were rather healthy. So, and lived long lives. So, especially my maternal line. And I'm like, wow, that's something to that. So also, I wanted to ask you about, and I hope I get a name right, is Vandana Shiva. She is Indian, and she's very outspoken about food sovereignty and health sovereignty and seed saving. And I've known you follow her closely for a while. So would you mind talking about that and some of her thoughts on?
I first came across her work. Her work was really connecting feminism to agriculture. Her early work, and I was just blown away by it. And she was one of the first really outspoken speakers on the anti-GMO movement. That's also kind of how I came to know about her and food activism in that respect. And in 2003, I actually flew out to India to study with her at her farm in Dehradun, which is kind of a little west of Delhi, if I remember correctly. And it was the first place I had ever seen a real, like, really well established seed saving. I don't know what to call it, like, whole enterprise, like a seed saving.
A bank?
A bank, thank you. That's a seed saving bank. Thank you. I'm like, that's exactly like, I've been saving seeds. I mean, we've all been saving seeds because, you save the seeds at the end of the season, you plant them. But I've never up until that time seen like a bank, like a real organized, like 30 different types of wheat, 30 different types of rice, just climate controlled, totally organized seed saving. And she really introduced me to the idea. And of course, I'd already been aware of like food activism, but I had never put two and two together, how our seeds are the foundation of society. Without these seeds, like we can't eat, we can't like talk about it, sovereignty, health sovereignty and food sovereignty. The seeds are the foundation. And while, I think deep down I knew it, being in that environment, it was like, wow, like they are ready. Like if anything were to go wrong, like they have seeds saved that they could feed a whole area in India. And then of course, I mean, we've all heard, was it the Iraq seed bank bombing? Like when we go to war, one of the first places that gets bombed are the seed banks, which is like devastating. But that like shows how important to society these seeds are. It's, we can't, without seeds, we can't grow food, we can't eat, we can't survive. So, I mean, Vandana Shiva, I mean, I don't think a year's gone by in the past 20 years that I haven't been to one of her classes online or in person. And she's always presenting new ideas. And, the work she does is tireless. I mean, I've never met a more focused person, just agriculture, food, like laws around supporting farmers, really educating about the damage that the Green Revolution did earlier, in the 70s and 80s, I think. Just an amazing, I mean, her work she's produced more work than one lifetime. It's really unbelievable how many books she's written, how she's just got her finger on the pulse of what's about to happen. And,
she's amazing, and she is not afraid to speak up against big corporations and call them out on what they've said and what their agendas are. She just she's fearless, and she needs to travel. As I remember, she's come to Massachusetts before, and had done speaking and things like that. So
Massachusetts was on her kind of every few year plan.
Yeah,
she'd visit often because she was really good friends with an amazing professor from Mount Holyoke called Jean Grosshalt, who pretty much started the feminism department at Mount Holyoke. Jean sadly passed away this past year in her late 80s. But Vandana and her were really close. So every few years, Vandana Shiva would come to Western Mass to hang out with Jean. And while she was here, she would always set up a talk or a speech or some public event, which I just feel like we're so lucky to have had her so often, just because she had this personal connection to Jean Grosshalt. So I hope she continues to come back now without Jean.
I hope so too. And I kind of kicked myself that I never went, because I had the opportunity a couple of times, and now it would be difficult.
No, I'll do my best to make sure she comes back to the area and keeps doing talks here.
Yeah, because it's so we need people like her that are fearless and do not mind who they step on toes, and say we need to keep our seeds. I mean, seeds are so important, and I think they're still finding seeds that have been saved for thousands of years in deep caves that are still
unbelievable.
viable. Yeah.
I know. I love that. That makes me so happy.
Me too.
Seeds, I mean.
Yeah. So, So I was, okay, so now I'm drawing on a blank because that she just blows me away and I'm just thinking, wow. So I guess another thing is along that line, what do you think that we can do in our local communities to bring her message of, food sovereignty and health sovereignty into our local communities? How can we get that going,
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is buy local,
Yeah.
support our local farmers. I mean, I'm not sure about your area, but my area, we have so many local farms. We're
Here
blessed with
too.
so much, local
too.
agriculture.
Yeah, we our meat comes from local farmers, and unfortunately our vegetables don't, because we do have some that are at the local farmers market, but they're not doing it organically. So they're spraying their crops, so I'm not going to. But one thing that they're doing in nearby town here is that they're creating a community garden. And I think that's an important thing to do too.
Absolutely.
Is to have a community garden that people can go to. There's another place in a nearby town where they help those that are in need, and they have their community garden right out in front of their brick and mortar for anybody to go and take as they need.
That's exactly, I know that's exactly what I believe needs to happen. I also saw, I think in Portland out west, that they're planting fruit trees everywhere so that people can help themselves to free fruit and have like free lots around the city with free food, which I think is great. I mean, depending on where you are, there are different variations of kind of the free food, the CSA,
Yeah, Joyce is
I'm in Louisiana, so
oh wow,
we're able to. As a matter of fact, I just talked to a friend of mine that I haven't talked to in a couple of years, and she said they just bought 16 acres in Mississippi, and they've planted all these fruit trees, and they got figs and pecans grow real abundantly down here. But they just added all in blueberry bushes. She's got a lot of blueberry bushes.
That's
so
great.
we get stuff like satsuma, which is kind of like an orange, but it's smaller. So, I mean, there's stuff growing down here I've never heard about before. I'm like, what the heck is this? But,
so supporting local, any way we can, sharing, getting to know your neighbors, supporting, try to, eat local is really, I think, the starting place.
Most definitely. And I know in my area, there's a lot of CSAs, which is community supported agriculture. And I would, if you're not a gardener, I would encourage people to get involved with your local CSA. You spend, I would say, less in the long run. What you do is you pay usually monthly for a subscription, and you're entitled to part of the harvest. And a lot of them will run year round, and they'll store like the root vegetables so that you'll even get root vegetables in midwinter. So that's one of the best ways I can think of is supporting them. And we have a lot of that, like I said, in New Hampshire. I think New England throughout is really loaded. And
I mean, I've also been a member of the CSA for 20 years, the same one, and I love it. I can't, I can't imagine not. And of course, farmers markets for those that don't have CSAs. My daughter just moved to New York City last week.
Oh, wow.
Which is kind of crazy to think that she's of that age now, that she has an apartment in the city. But I went to visit her, help her move that first weekend. And the thing that made me happiest, she's in Harlem. Right across the street from her is a farmer's market, a Saturday morning farmer's market. And they had like organic food and flowers and like mushrooms. And, while she doesn't care as much as I do, I must admit, it just made me happy to know that something that she's grown up with and just probably take them for granted that, we go to farmers market every Saturday morning. We're members of CSA. Like, it's really easy to access good organic fruit and vegetables. Every Saturday morning now, she literally like opens her apartment front door and there's a farmers market. So
even in one of the biggest cities and crowded cities in the world, you can find farmers markets and get out there and support your local farmers.
I'm sure like every neighborhood these days in big cities have farmers markets. And so, it's not just, we live in the country. I'm privileged. I live in the country. We have, but even in the city, they're there.
Yep.
So I think that supporting and just taking that a step further, like really growing community, like knowing your neighbors, supporting one another really also strengthens the economy. Like, if every neighborhood is connected, feels community, I think that's also a step in the right direction, in terms of humanity and kindness, because it's all connected. Right. We're all connected.
Right. Well, that's like here we live on a dead end road, which is kind of nice because it's like everybody on the road knows everybody else, for the most part. And my husband's building a chicken coop, and there were 2 other families who wanted chickens, but can't really attend to them. So we had talked about going in on it together, and we would have the chickens here. And then this way, when we went on vacation for a week, we have somebody else that can come by and tend to them.
That's great. I feel like moving away, that's the perfect example of moving away from an individual society where everyone does everything in one person, one car, just to start doing things together. Like, so, and it's a win-win, not only does everyone have access to eggs, but when you go away, you have someone to take care of the chickens, someone else who's equally invested.
Right.
And that, I believe leads to everyone's kind of wealth and health.
Yeah, I want to say one thing about the farmers markets for people who are like, wow, I never thought about going to the farmers market. Be sure you talk to the farmers, because just because it's at a farmers market does not necessarily mean it's good quality food. Talk to them, ask them about their practices, ask them if they're spraying, what they're spraying with, and
Good
educate
point.
yourself. And if you can, if this is something you want to do, is something my husband and I have done, see if you can go visit their farm. See if you can view exactly how you're practicing, because another thing that happens at farmers markets is that the people who are selling the stuff aren't necessarily growing it. There are some that are bringing it in from the stores. So we asked one farmer if we can go visit his farm, and he said yes. And then when the day came, it was like, oh, I have something to do. And then after that, he just like talked around it. So I think he was one of those people who actually was not growing the food that he was selling.
Yeah.
That's it.
Therefore, he can't talk about the practices.
Right. And that's Joyce goes to farmers markets all the time. So that's why she's really familiar with things like that can happen. But I think for the most part, I don't know if that's rare, but I'm sure it happens. But for the most part, it's good to talk with the people and find out.
It actually is. It's not all that rare. It is not all that rare for this to happen. I'd actually seen a show, and I forget the name of it now, but they were touching on like different things, and they took hidden cameras into various farmers markets and were able to prove that these people were not growing the stuff that they were selling.
Yeah, I think it's important to be educated and to, again, support the local, because I noticed that in this New York City farmers market as well, that it wasn't all completely local, that some of them were coming from, Southern Jersey, or, the closer to home that you could buy from, the better. The more local, the better. So yes, be a good consumer, ask. mean,
But
I
it
think those are
also buying, that locally, the fresher your food is when it's picked, the more of a natural vibrational frequency it has contained within it, which is going to raise our natural vibrational frequency.
the important point.
And we have a local farm stand, and they're not organic and they're not perfect, but they're in my neighborhood. And I feel like if they're spraying, it's going to be in, the wind's blowing right, it's going to end up my way. And I'm not for that, but I am for supporting a local farm. They've been there a long time. They're doing a lot for the community by having the fresh produce. They grow it themselves. If they don't grow it themselves, then they tell you that they've brought it in from elsewhere. So, I mean,
Well,
sometimes,
that's good that they're being transparent.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
like,
there are times I've chosen local over organic as well. Like
that's
if
what
I'm going to
thank
buy
you.
a form of organic milk that comes, from God knows where.
Right.
If I can buy local, sometimes that's an educated choice that I make. Or some farms can't afford to go organic.
Yep.
Right.
And they don't actually spray, but they're not organic. That
Yep.
comes down to, I think, a point you made, Joyce, talking to the farmer, understanding their practices and how much,
Right.
how invested they are.
Because like you just said, Tanya, they can't afford to because of the price. But I don't care if your vegetables don't say, organic USDA. What are your practices? That's what I'm interested in.
That's
I'm
the
interested
question.
if
What are
you're
your
certified.
practices?
I know that this farm, that they practice crop rotation, and they also have chickens that they rotate throughout the areas. So actually, like, instead of going to the supermarket and buying something organic from Chile or something, I would rather support my local farmer who's doing their best, even if it's not perfect.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, because keeping the money within the community.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not going to some sharecropper that's working their butt off and living in a toxic environment. And a lot of these farmers do. That's one of the things people don't realize is we think of farmland as being pastoral and really a great place to grow up, but on some of these big industrial farms, it's not. It is not a healthy place for the kids. Can't go outside. Everything's become toxic. There's a group. Let me see if I can come up with it real quick. What is it? You're probably familiar. This fairly. What is? Yeah. Let me see. What is it?
So for people who don't know,
Thank you. Farmers Footprint Community.
Okay,
Yeah. Farmers Footprint Community. They're a good resource, and they're as far as I can tell, they're on the same lines. And I can't remember the founder, but he's on the same line of of getting these farms cleaned up so that that it's a healthy place for the family that's invested in the land, and it's also the food and the product that's healthy for the people in ingesting the food. So that's Farmers Footprint Community. That's another resource that
because what you also brought up makes me think of like treating your farmers right, because food is also vibrational medicine. And if your farmers are happy and treated well, the food energetically is going to be so much more potent and have a higher vibration, like you said earlier, Joyce. So it's kind of the working conditions are so important as well.
Right. It's just not, we're talking a lot about growing, but it's not just about the growing of the vegetables. It's like with the animals, how are they being treated? And like you said, because we are all interconnected, and if the farmers, not in a good way, that stress is being put off onto that animal, and then that if we eat that animal, then that's going into us, and it's creating a negative vibration within us. So we,
Absolutely.
there's so much that we're not told, isn't there?
Yeah, and then
Not-
and the same with the herbs and the food, the vegetables. The vibrational energy is a lot higher. A lot of this stuff that you can buy in the supermarkets, not even picked at the right time, and not done with that intent. Like Tanya's talking about the intent, and when she's out gathering herbs, and using the highest intent that she can. And so her medicines are going to be, her herbal mixtures are going to be much better than that you could get on the store shelf. And I think that's why sometimes you hear, oh, well, herbal remedies are not, they don't work.
Mhm.
Well, where are your herbal remedies coming from?
Right.
And that's what I always tell my students. One of the things I always tell them when they're, we go harvesting from the garden and we come in and, you're separating, let's say, the St. John's wort flowers from the stem, and, you're like preparing the medicine. And so often, they're talking to each other about what happened last night or like whatever. I'm like, no, when you're making herbal medicine, you have to focus on healing and the herbs.
Right.
Because they're vibrational, they're picking up. If you're yelling about, your boyfriend or your bad date, the medicine is picking that up. It's not picking
Right.
up the intention that you're creating this medicine to heal. And, I think that's already, like coming back to that whole interconnectedness,
Right.
like that we're interconnected physically, spiritually, and emotionally.
Right.
And,
I'm even aware of the music I have playing when I'm making my infusions, or I brew kombucha when I'm doing that, when I'm formulating skincare products. So I'm even aware of what's in the background.
that I agree. I mean, space and energy and mood, really important.
Yes. Yes.
If I'm like really pissy about, if I'm arguing with my daughter, that's not a great time to make an herbal blend. It's like, or if I'm, which again is like culturally, we're always multitasking. I mean,
Yes.
we've like, that's another, slow down one thing at a time. Because, I mean, I know I'm definitely, not perfect by far, always trying to do too much. And I have to keep, reminding myself, one thing at a time, complete the circle, slow down. Everything, you had began, Heidi, this whole conversation with intention and sovereignty, sovereignty, like health sovereignty, and
Mm-hmm.
and at some point, I think one of you said something like, so much we're not taught. No, there's so much missing. We have to take ownership of our health.
Right. Right.
And intentional. And just like if we weren't always trying to do 300 things at the same time, it would be a lot easier to navigate. But like we always have like one part of, we're just always so split in so many different directions, trying to get so much done at a time, that it's so easy to not fully own our health. Or, and which I think is really important, that we are we are responsible for our health.
Right.
We are responsible for making the right decisions for ourselves. We're responsible for what we eat. And if we owned this, I think our health would be so much better.
And
Bravo.
I think that would reflect out into our communities also. The health of our communities it's like we often say in metaphysical training and things like that, claim your power, stand in your truth, stand in your power. And when you take full responsibility for the being you are and how you express your beingness, how you care for your body and your own mental, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional health, when you take full responsibility for that, that's going to blossom out to the people around you and to the community around you.
Absolutely. I agree fully. And we must not be so quick to hand our power over to teachers, to doctors, to the government. Like, it's like we're so quick to believe that someone knows better or someone is looking out for us. Not to be a conspiracy theorist and not to be negative, because I'm actually, a very positive, hopeful person in general.
Right.
But, no one is looking out for us.
No, I mean, reality is reality.
Reality, maybe our family's looking out for us, our
Right.
community could be looking out for us, but beyond our friends, community, and family, no one is looking out for us.
Nope, they don't care.
Because it's, capitalist society, money's the bottom line.
Yeah.
And so, we have to be those people that look out for ourselves, our friends, our family, and our community for us
And to
to
teach
grow.
And to teach others.
Absolutely.
That was wonderfully said.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate that. And you've got this light surrounding you.
Yes, you do.
And it looks amazing.
I think it might be dust. I was actually noticing that on my screen, everything looks a little hazy. I'm like, what is that? The
It
light?
wasn't like that it wasn't like that in the beginning.
No, I think it might be the time of day or the light. Yeah, I was noticing, like, you two are so clear, and I look like I'm in a smoke haze.
And you got this blue streak going through it.
Yeah, I think I have two windows, like on either side of me, like a window behind me and a side window. And I think the light is just.
I was wondering if you didn't have a prism, because in that one area, like to your left, over your shoulder, your left shoulder, you
This
see
thing
that
here?
Heidi? No, your left.
No, left. This one?
Yeah. Over your left shoulder. Heidi, do you see all that color?
Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's like I don't think it's.
I don't see that. I don't know what's going on. There's a mirror here. I don't know. I'm just noticing. I mean, I'm loving. I wish I could really see it, but the box is like this big,
It's, you'll have to.
So this was so fun.
Yeah.
So do you do this every week? How often do you have these podcasts?
Yeah,
every week.
Every week. And it's new. It's a new venture, but my thing is, connecting people with the earth, because I think that's so. We've lost our connection to the earth as a society as a whole. And so my mission is to reconnect people in any way that I can, to get the message out there. The more we're in touch with the seasons, the more we're in touch with the ground under our feet. I mean, when did walking barefoot become a thing? When did that, isn't that something that we naturally should be doing?
Right.
They call it
like forest bathing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
mean, it kind of kills me as much as I love it.
Right, exactly. It's a thing, walk barefoot, and so and we've lost that society as a whole has lost that connection. And
Right.
Joyce is on the same page. She's more into body dynamics and metaphysical and everything, and so together we just, I feel like we've got, well, I can't say I have the whole picture, but I think we got a dynamic picture.
No, man, we got the whole picture.
We got
it all. This is great. Go with it.
Yeah. So anyway, from UFOs to whatever is affecting us, in our psyches, in our health, in our wellness, and paranormal experiences, anything like that is affecting us, and we feel like it's something that we can discuss and bring awareness. So we like fringe. So when you said about earlier about the poison ivy beyond the fringe, we love the fringe. That's
well, that was like we had I think it was Melanie
Yes.
that was on here where she was talking about speaking to the insects to get them off of her patio.
I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Well, I
then,
really appreciate you having me on,
and I appreciate
thinking
you
of me.
accepting the invitation. I was like, I gotta see if I can get, some of my mentors, that I really think have a lot to say. And just before we close, I want to mention that something that I was part of and Tanya was part of in about supporting people was in Standing Rock. She did a fundraiser, I attended, and we made fire cider and
So many gallons.
gallons of fire cider. I helped it once anyway when I could. And so she is definitely, she walks her talk. I just want to say that. So
I
I
appreciate that.
yeah. So I was
So Tanya, you have some programs coming up soon that you
Yeah.
want to talk about?
So let me just, I run Blazing Star Herbal School, which is in Weston, Massachusetts. My website is www.blazingstarherbalschool.typepad.com. And I run herbal apprenticeships that last 10 months, meet weekly, that really cover all aspects of herbalism and earth connection. My newest program, which begins in September, is a botanical art studio program where we connect with plants and our local environment differently. Instead of making medicine, we're making art, but we're still connecting with the plants. We're still getting to know our neighborhood plants and weeds. And we're making botanical prints and eco prints and cyanotype photography method. And I'm really excited about anything that any method I can use to get to know the natural world better. And so that's what that program's about. But anyone, can go to the website, and we also have Facebook, Facebook account, Blazing Star Herbal School. If anyone wants to reach out, I'm here.
So Tanya, if people want to come from out of state, are there accommodations?
I don't personally offer accommodations, but there are lots of Airbnbs in the area that people can, and an occasion I'll offer camping in the, in the summer. So I can definitely help someone get set
And
up.
of course, they should bring a friend so they can split the cost.
Absolutely, we love that. Bringing friends, the more the merrier,
Right, totally.
well, this has been really amazing. I really enjoyed it. And I'm so glad that you accepted the invitation to speak with us. And I would, if you're open, I would love to have you come back in the future and we can really drill into some topic again. And yeah,
that'd be great.
Yeah.
Keep doing this. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the invitation and wish you all the best with the future of this podcast.
Thank you,
Tanya.
Thank you so much. So remember, everyone, get out there and be wild and breathe and hug a neighbor, hug a tree.
I like that.
And keep shining your light.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.